everybody, welcome back to Punk Rock Yoga. I'm Scott Anderson. I'm here with my buddy Nick, and this is Fix Your Flow. Now, what we're going to talk about today is a common sequence that I see in lots and lots of vinyasa yoga classes. It creates a problem for students if you're a teacher. It creates a problem for you if you're a student. We want to talk about how to avoid this problem, and it's called stretch-induced force deficit. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a deficit of force from a muscle when you need it. So my buddy Nick here is going to come into a downward facing dog. Just go ahead and face that way, Nick. And this is the sequence that you're typically going to see. From downward facing dog, you're going to be asked in a vinyasa class to step your right foot forward. That's going to put your body in a low lunge. Now let's focus on the one area that we want to talk about today, and that's the right glute muscle. By having his knee to his chest, his leg is in deep flexion. That means that this glute is in an isometrically lengthened position. From this position, we typically see in yoga classes, and I know this is going to look familiar to everyone here, he's going to reach his hands into the air. He's in a crescent lunge. Now, he brought his spine vertical to the earth, but please note that he's still lunging on this right leg, and this right glute is still in an isometrically lengthened position. Typically the third position we might see in this sequence. And I also want to mention very quickly that it doesn't have to be this specific set of 5 poses, just any sequence in which you're asked to lunge and hold a lunge on a leg for a long time. But typically what we would see after this would be a twist. So he's going to start by doing a high twist, reaching his hands out, turning to the camera. But in the course of these 5 poses that I want you to become familiar with, typically what we would see next is the left hand going down into a low twist. The left hand goes down so that the body's prepared for the right hand coming down and the left leg lifting up. Don't do it quite yet, Nick, because what I want people to see here in this twist is that not only is he still lunging and still holding this isometrically lengthened position, he is still getting angrier and angrier at me as I talk to you guys. But this is what happens in a yoga class, right? The instructor talks for a long time. You're holding this pose forever.
And it is a dark place.
That's what produces the deficit, this stretch-induced force deficit. This muscle is fatigued. It's tired. Next position we would see somebody go into is standing splits. So he plants his hands and lifts the left leg. Now, here's where you feel relief. Now that you no longer have basically a bent knee, your thigh can contract and come out of its lengthened position. So the thigh feels relieved, the glute does not, because we're still hinging at the right hip, the right glute is still lengthening.
My butt's kind of tired. Let's watch something else.
That means that this muscle is tired, and that creates muscular compensations. That means that whatever his butt can't do that it's supposed to do, his back or maybe his hamstring is going to try to help him do. However, here's the last position. This is where we run into trouble. It's being asked to rise up into a single leg stance and balance. So as he lifts his left leg, and I know how strong this guy is, he's laughing at me right now because he knows how damn hard that was. So when I'm in the back of the room watching and practicing with a group of people and watching this class take place, go ahead and take a break there, Nick. What we see is people that have a tired glute rising up and wobbling because this muscle is so tired, it is fatigued, it has a deficit of force.
A momentary loss of muscular coordination.
What we need is a surplus of force if we're going to come up high into the air and be able to stick our balance, right? So that's the problem. I see it everywhere, and you've probably done it many times in your vinyasa class. And if you're an instructor, you've probably taught that sequence.
I don't do that.
God knows I have and did for years. But let's fix this, okay? Let's fix this flow. Now, if we've covered the fact that I'm going to have Nick face the other way so that he can operate off his other leg, because I like this guy. I don't want him to be mad at me tonight. So what he's going to do is come in a downward facing dog. Now, also consider that it's not necessarily the poses, it's the length of time, right? So if I come over here real fast, because I want to grab my water bottle and show you this, here's an important principle. This water bottle isn't very heavy. It's not the weight, it's how long you have to hold it. So if I had to hold this bottle of water while Nick hangs out in the back there doing downward facing dog, if I have to hold this for 10 minutes, my right arm and shoulder are going to burn and I'm going to want to drop this thing eventually, even though it's relatively empty. It's just got a little bit of ice in it. So that's my point. The longer you hold something, that's what the problem is.
Can you solve the problem in such a short time?
Anytime you're in a sequence where you have to lunge for a long time, you want to think about a way in which you can relieve that glute, because if the muscle can't perform well, your body's going to ask for a bunch of muscular compensations. That means other muscles are going to have to do their job and the job that this glute won't do. So here's how to fix it if you're a practitioner in a yoga class where an instructor asks you to do this position. So he's going to step his left foot forward. He's back in his low lunge. Rises up into his high lunge, and he's in a crescent lunge. And then he twists, reaches the right hand for the floor and the left hand for the ceiling. Now he's in his low twist, and this muscle, he hasn't held it very long. He's probably going to do a much better job of balancing, but that's not my point. My point is that this muscle is in an isometrically lengthened position, and that it's going to do a poor job when it comes time to fire and contract to power him up with stability. The next position would be standing splits. So Nick knows from years and years of working with me and practicing with me that he doesn't want to balance on this left leg because this glute is no longer going to be a reliable muscle to guide him up. So what you would do in this situation, if your instructor tells you next to come into a single leg stance or a single leg mountain to rise up and bring your leg in the air, what Nick's going to do instead is plant his foot, rise up, and lift the left leg, the one he was lunging on. This has a twofold benefit. One, he's standing upright on his right leg. That's his fresh leg. If you don't believe me, try this at home. The other thing he's doing is he's lifting the leg into flexion at the hip that was in extension. That means, based on the law of reciprocal inhibition, that in order for his glute to let go so that the hip flexor takes over, this muscle has to relax and release.
F me in the ass. That's amazing.
Right? So go ahead and come out of that one, Nick. Now, that's what you should do if you're a practitioner and you're being asked to do that in a vinyasa class. In any scenario where you've been lunging on a leg for a long time and this leg is tired and sore, and sometimes it seems like the teacher just takes delight in making that leg burn and go crazy, but you can see, even me, you can wobble a lot, and that's what I see. You see a lot of wobble because this glute is tired and it can't be relied upon to stabilize you well. So if you're an instructor, the answer is even simpler. Take this sequence of poses and simply do them in reverse.
Elegant proof of intelligence, isn't it?
And reverse would look like this. Nick is going to start with his single leg stance. So I'm going to have him come up onto his right foot. So that would be, this would be starting a sequence from, say, the top of your mat. We pulled the mat that we were using because it was really windy. But he's in his single leg stance. If he goes in reverse, he would come into standing splits from here, planting the hands and extending the leg. Now what happens here is that the muscle that was contracting and holding him up now slowly lengthens, and that it would be the metaphoric equivalent of,
give us the line again,
bringing someone down on a rope than to pull somebody up a mountain with a rope. So he's just slowly letting this glute lengthen. The next position would be that twist. He's going to plant his left foot, reach the right hand up, and then he reaches both hands up and turns to face what would be the top of his mat. He's in a crescent lunge, and finally reaching the hands down, and he's in a low lunge. From there, you could step forward, but you would probably want to step back, and then you could cycle through your vinyasa if that's what you were doing. Nick, that was great work, man. So listen, please keep in mind that stretch-induced force deficit is a deficit of force. And we have the opportunity simply by switching the legs to create a surplus of force. We get to balance on a fresh leg. Down in the description of this video, I've written an article that goes into greater detail on the science of muscular compensation and stretch-induced force deficit. If you're a yoga instructor or just a very curious yogi, I hope you'll take a look at that. And also, please leave me a question if you have one down in the comments, or leave me a comment if you don't have a question, and let me know how much you loved or hated this video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Goodbye to you. Have a fine journey and a safe return.
1, 2, 3, 4.